Striking teaching and graduate assistants and contract faculty at York University have been ratcheting up the pressure this week in hopes of bringing an end to their job action, which began back on November the 6th.
Aside from manning the picket line, strikers have been camped out around the clock outside the office of the university's president. They want a meeting with him and a promise to host a public forum on the strike next month. Meanwhile, thousands of York students are facing the grim prospect of losing their year if classes remain closed much longer into the new year.
Joining us now from our studios at Queen's Park is Lyndon Koopmans. He's a York University student and organizer of the anti-strike group YorkNotHostage.com. Next to him, Progressive Conservative MPP Peter Shurman. And on the phone, we have Fred Hahn of CUPE. Fred, first question to you. Will you consider binding arbitration to settle this dispute?
The local's been pretty clear about that. In fact, the university's been clear about it. They put in writing a number of years ago that binding arbitration doesn't really work. What really works is getting back to the table to hammer out a deal, and that's what the employer should be doing. Why the students are there pressuring the president of the university to actually be engaged in collective bargaining, to talk to the university community, and more importantly, to talk to the local union so we can get the strike settled.
Okay, Lyndon, how much longer can this strike go on before students lose the year?
Well, personally, I don't think it's much longer. Classes are not going to resume. The earliest they could resume is the 5th. That's not going to happen, I don't think, from the way things are looking. There's been no negotiations. I mean, 3 negotiation days. We've been on strike for, almost 2 months now. And, I mean, the lack of negotiations is certainly an indication that the strike will go on a long time. And also the fact that the government hasn't stepped in yet is also an indication that this may go on for a long time.
All right, so
but do you know what a deadline is? Is it the end of January, the end of February, before they tell you you lose your year?
I think it's around 12 weeks, and that's the best we know. There's no real, they don't really want to tell us what the date is, because obviously it would give bargaining power to both parties.
All right.
In that.
Okay, Peter, let's talk about the government. Queen's Park refused to order an end to the strike before the legislature rose for the holidays last week. Any chance the government could act before the House resumes sitting in February?
Well, I don't speak for Dalton McGuinty, obviously, but I would implore him to reconsider, as I did in the House many, many times. These are not normal times. We are in our 6th week with this strike. You know that the sides are so far apart that the mediator is not suggesting that anybody get back to the table. You hear the position that's been taken by Fred on behalf of CUPE. You hear the difficulty in which the students find themselves. Chances are good that before anybody does anything, we're into 9 weeks. And Lyndon is right. We probably are about 12 weeks before this year is absolutely lost. The students are the unwitting people in this entire piece. They have no voice at the table. They are the people who are going to lose their year. That is a huge cost to them and a huge cost to the economy, and we have a government that doesn't care.
Okay, Fred, very briefly.
That's why the university should actually be engaged in bargaining.
Fred, please. What are there 3 issues that are really holding this up? Money, daycare, and job security? Would that summarize it?
Those issues have been there for some time, right? So these are workers, as you know.
So those are the 3 issues. Anybody who's read the papers
know that they're doing 50% of the teaching at the university, and they're actually working for wages that,
Okay, how much do they make per hour?
It's not per hour.
No, it is per hour, because they work about 10 hours per week. So how much per hour?
No. They're paid for 10 hours a week, but they work much more. Anyone who knows anything about university education knows.
Okay, but hang on. Let's talk, because I've talked to a number of teachers' assistants at other universities, and they say they make between $30 and $40 per hour, and they work about 10, or they're paid for about 10 hours per week. But they are students, correct? These are students.
That's the other thing. There's no dichotomy between these workers and students. These workers are students. Right, and so they're also not attending their classes, right? I mean, they're in the same kind of jeopardy.
It's a pretty good, but $350 to $400 per week isn't bad if you're a student going to university.
Except that you have to pay tuition to keep your job, right?
But you are also reambused for that.
Only
don't
partially
you understand?
reimbursed.
Yes, you are.
What
if you do other projects,
economy, don't you understand?
Go ahead, Peter. Say that again.
Do you know where you live? Do you know that it's 2008? Do you know that everybody else is losing their job and you guys are sitting there holding up for what? 2 years, 11%? Are you out of your mind?
It's also about job security. It's also about the reality that people with PhDs who owe, some of them, $70,000, $80,000 a year.
Well, then get out and get a real job.
Their
They're
education
still
are being
in school.
asked to conduct the actual teaching at the university and being paid $17,000 a course.
Fred, they're students. If they want to make big money, they go out and get a job in the big bad world.
Faculty. In fact, there's been a shift in the province, right, about contingent workers and about changing the Employment Standards Act to talk about contract and contingent workers, because we realize that while we're facing these difficult economic times, it makes no sense.
Fred, they're students.
You listen to the union speak. Listen to this union speak, everybody. These guys are going to be out there until next July, unless Dalton McGuinty steps in. That's what's going to happen.
The only way they'll be out there till July is if the employer actually allows that to happen. The employer needs to go back to the bargaining table. The employer needs to sit down and figure this out with
the employer offered you binding arbitration. Fred, they offered binding arbitration 2 months ago.
Okay, folks, hang on a second. Let's get to Lyndon here. Lyndon, you must know some of these teaching assistants. They're students. If you were in their position, can you relate to what they're going through? Do you think they should be paid more for the number of hours they're working? Or, as Donna says, the fact that they're students and making somewhere between $350 and $400 a week, is that pretty good for someone who's a student and is also a teaching assistant?
Well, actually, my cousin's a TA at York University, and she's informed me that she gets between $20 and $30 an hour. And she says it's fantastic. She loves the money that she's getting. And the most important thing is she's teaching and she's doing something she loves. She knows it's not a career. She just wants this to supplement her income. And she thinks it's great that it's supplementing her income. And I think it's ridiculous to think that all of these TAs want more money. She's extremely happy with what she's getting.
Because it's decent money as a student, isn't it?
Well, the most important thing, she wants to be in class teaching. That's what she's here for.
They're having to pay their rent. You can't expect people to pay their rent on wages the minimum wage.
No, they're students. They're going to end up with a debt. They're only supplementing their way through school, and then they're going to go out into the big bad world and get a job, a real job.
And when they get a job in the big bad world as a contract faculty person, they're going to be making $17,000 a year, and they're going to have to reapply.
Then they won't go back to the university. They'll go into the other part of the big bad world. The university isn't really reflective of the world. Let's be honest. It's a great place to work, but you don't, just because you're a student and you're working at a university doesn't mean you should be making more than $40 an hour.
Right, Donna.
Yes.
When you listen to this, you know that ultimately, if this strike is going to be settled, it's going to be settled at a legislated level.
And
it's
the students are going to
done here in Queen's Park, and the students are going to pay for this, and hopefully the government's going to come to its senses. I want to make a couple of points here that your listeners, your viewers should know. One is that I've been approached by Liberal MPPs, my opposite numbers, from the McGuinty government itself, saying, keep asking the questions. I had one cabinet minister say, my daughter is in York University. I've got people from the government side redirecting their constituents to call my office because I've picked up the torch as the standard bearer on this thing. I don't need it. I don't want it. I just happen to represent a riding that is adjacent to York.
Oh, come on, Peter. It's pretty good PR, too. It's a good fight to fight. Hang on a sec. It is. Lyndon, I want to ask you before we go, how is this going to affect your life if you lose the school year?
If I lose the school year, not only will it be my finances that are lost, I'm going to have to waste a whole year of my life going back to university. I mean, I want to get out in the workforce and do something with my life. Not only that, I mean, it is my first year at university, and I'm really going to miss out on that experience. Not only that, it's going to be extremely challenging to get summer jobs, internships, and for other people who have families, children, who are students, how are they going to support them? I mean, another year in the university, it's a huge sacrifice to go back to education, but to go back to education for another year, that's unbelievable. It's not possible. It's ridiculous. It shouldn't happen.
And it's unfair.
Well said. Sorry, Fred, we're out of time. Sorry, Fred, we're out of time. We've got to go. Thanks so much, Lyndon Koopmans, Peter Shurman, Fred Hahn. Let's hope we get this settled quickly.
You are a teacher's assistant here at McMaster University. Do you think that all teachers' assistants should have the right to strike if it means that students could lose their year?
So I don't know if that's really a fair question because what happens then is that there's a lot of public, if for example in the event that they lose their year due to the TA striking, I mean it kind of brings a public opinion against the TA union, you know.
Like I have a job part-time right now, and having saved up all that money to do something in the future would now have to go to paying my tuition costs, and we would have to be, if we're not reimbursed, I guess all the money that I would have worked for would go to waste.
Right now, there's 3 of us, brother, sister, going to Mac. And 3 of us, my parents have to pay for 3 different rents. So all that $1,200, which is $400 for each of us, would have to, for the whole year, would have to be paid again.
When we come back, romantic comedies